I mean, I'm afraid our situation is as silly as that. But for lack of understanding what? What is it that is not understood on our side? You know.
I don't think we understand that communism isn't the kind of militant communism that it was like when it first started out. There used to be like international conferences, you know, Kill America conferences, like maybe they still hold them. But they're all kind of waiting now. Like Russia isn't the country, you know, it's building itself up. It's going more towards Western capitalism than we are in this country. Really
if you consider the sort of development of communism in Russia, or in the thought of Karl Marx, Marxist socialism, it wouldn't make any sense at all without understanding the development of English industrialism in the 18th and 19th centuries. Without understanding what was going on industrially, the sudden reaction against it would mean nothing. Why do you think Karl Marx was able to develop such rage against capitalist imperialism? What went on in his bosom? How was it possible? You couldn't understand that without quite a lot of historical background, because he didn't understand it very well himself. He didn't care. As long as he was good and mad, he was happy. It was a way of life. But the things are changing so fast now that we switch out of the old mechanical industrialism into the new electric technology, that the technical revolution that is going on in our own world is far bigger than anything that was going on in Marx's day. So Marxism and communism are peanuts compared to electric technology. And to be fighting against Marxism or communism in the electric age is to be like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. You're just mistaking the enemy altogether. Yes, sir.
I believe the threat is being misinterpreted. It's not the threat of communism. It's a threat of one country against another country. I think Mao is not primarily a Marxist. He's primarily a very astute Machiavellian more than anything else.
That's what all politicians strive to be. Most of them are not that bright.
We're fighting another force. You know, this is.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. We have mistaken where the force is. It's here. It's not out there at all. The force that is communizing the world is in General Electric and in the Bell Telephone Labs. It is not in Asia or in Russia. We're doing it to ourselves.
Well, this is a separate entity from the war in Vietnam. The war in Vietnam is a political war.
Oh, in that case, it just belongs to another century. Doesn't belong to the 20th century.
Political wars are inherent in all societies. I don't think a society can exist without some external conflict to lend it cohesion within.
Or definition. That's another issue. What is the purpose of war psychologically? Beyond helping the country or the individual to have a strong image of who he is. War as a quest for identity is a very important and neglected theme. Violence as quest for identity could take place whenever people feel their identity is threatened. The moment people feel they're losing their identity, they could get very angry and very aggressive and very militant, just in the hope of retaining an identity. This may be the history of war. It may be possible to diagnose not only when war did occur, but when it will occur by this simple postulate. Now, in our world, our identity is being challenged by the hour, by the new technology. the relation of man to man and of country to country is being changed today at tremendous speed. It's very comforting to have an enemy like communism that you could point at and say they are to blame for our loss of identity.
I would think that people generally accept a change of identity, which is what's going on now from within, from technology. However, war is necessary to lend some cohesive force to any society whatsoever. I don't think a society can exist without war. Not necessarily as a search for identity.
Have you ever heard this expressed before as a philosophy of society? You have heard? Where did you hear it? Everyone. You think this is a fairly common sentiment? Huh?
Sure.
Who was it that said history is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake? But you know, you were expressing that nightmare in very powerful terms. If you say or think or imagine that war is a beneficent means of acquiring identity or a necessary means of acquiring identity, then you're saying human history is pure nightmare and will continue to be nothing else but nightmare.
If we're heading for a tribal society, like you said.
This is my theory.
Okay, well,
I just simply notice what you people are doing.
All right, let's say we're heading for a tribal society. In a tribal society, from what I can see, if you go back to like these ancient societies that have been tribal for centuries, there doesn't seem to be any war as we know it.
Oh, yes. Tribes fight each other furiously.
Well, what if you're all one big tribe? Do you really fight?
Yep. Families fight. Family feuds. Don't you remember the old Kentucky days? The family feuds? They do it again for thrills and identity.
You can make up rules for it. That's what they did. There were very definite rules followed. Like in Vietnam, I think people are very confused because the rules aren't laid down. They don't know exactly how to fight.
The Geneva Convention hasn't been circulated over there. But I don't think they're the kind of rules that would attract them.
In the Eastern society, it seems to me that even the war, it could be only the implosion, not an explosion. Western powers tend to believe that war is an expansionist, explosive idea.
But now, well, you see, though, in Vietnam at present,
it's not expansionist.
It's not expansionist because we don't want to be there. And so, for the first time, we're fighting an electronic war. This is our first electronic war, and it's very confusing.
I'm referring to that, the containment idea. I think that since in the Eastern idea, it's always implosion, so that if North Vietnamese control the North Vietnam and South Vietnam, their own country, they will not go farther than that. That's their idea, and I think that's Asian mind. While you Westerners are so masculine that you tend to believe that one country wants to expand to control another country. There comes the difference. Here comes the American worries that once Vietnam falls to communism, another country will fall to communism. It may, but it's not because of the aggression. It's because of the implosion. I mean, Thailand may fall to communism not because North Vietnamese come into Thailand, but because Thai turns to communism. That's I think, how the Asians work.
And that is what's happening to us. Without wanting to or thinking about it, we are turning to communism very rapidly in this country. In any part of the electric or 20th century world, communism is simply a function of service industries and service information. Now, the imperialism of the 19th century was the market. The things that drove people into other people's territory was the need to conquer new markets for products. That isn't true now. In an age of universal information and service industries and knowledge industries, the need to conquer other territories in order to sell them Ford cars or any kind of product is gone.
Then maybe we could say that, like in former times, it might be conceivable that you could fight, two nations could fight over a piece of land, but it's not conceivable now. It's more what you said about the feudal type of thing, that a feud really doesn't, it gets away very quickly for whatever the little
You know,
thing it was.
the great feuds occurred over loss of face. Somebody's honor had been smirched. They had lost face. Now, that's what's happening to us in communism. We feel we're losing our image.
So we're fighting for our whole Western way of life. We're not fighting for...
Not fighting for territory or power. Yeah.
We're using a limited warfare in order not only to maintain things, but also to preserve oneself.
But again, the preserving is of an image, not of territory.
I mean preserving your image, but also saving yourselves from destruction. You know, this is what the limited...
But the destruction is from within. It's an implosion, not an explosion from without. The dangers to us are not from outside. They're from inside. And we don't know how to fight that. We've never had to do this before. It's like some member of your own family dragging down the family name into the mud. How do you fight your own family?
What's going to happen to, as a result of, say, the tremendous technological development, what's going to happen to the old American idea of pragmatism?
Of pragmatism? Well, the metaphor, it will always hold up. It just means experience, doing something. Don't do something, just stand there. Now, that is the new kind of pragmatism, because whatever you're likely to do could sort of be catastrophic, like pushing the wrong button. But pragmatism is merely the simple metaphor of activism, doing things, getting things done, and I don't think that any place or time in the world has ever been against pragmatism. I never heard of anybody being against pragmatism. Even Buddha was a pragmatist in the sense that what he set up as exercises were practical means of human happiness and well-being. Very pragmatic. All Oriental ethics are very pragmatist. They're not based on any abstract theory, but entirely on practical results. I wasn't intending to give a speech at all, but just to start discussion. So we've got some discussion, but let's waste Mr. Takamura's the opportunity of his presence here. If he can fill us in on things that we don't know about, I wish he would.
Would you say that the Oriental is a more interior type of person?
Of
that
course.
Brought the battleground more within himself?
But he's not as interior as the electric man. You see, every time you open the paper, you read about new cults of inner life springing up. Drugs are simply an attempt, the lazy man's attempt at Buddhism. The inner trip. And they're taken like just an aspirin spirit. But the inner trip is the new Orientalism of our world. Yeah. The electronic circuit world, you see, isn't all inner. It's a complete feedback. Electric technology is all Buddhistic as such. But so is our nervous system. Electric technology is simply an extension of our own nervous system. Now we have our nervous system outside us. We can do things with that we couldn't do before. All previous technologies merely put outside our physical powers, our arms, our backs, our eyes, our ears. Electrical technology puts the nervous system outside as an environment, information environment. So the inner trip results automatically.
But in a very masculine way.
No?
No?
Because we're going very feminine in the Western world. Feminine, though, you see, means integral. That's imploded. Masculine means specialist, fragmented. That's explode. Feminine means unified, integral. Masculine means fragmented, specialist, outer. At least it used to in our Western world. There's no need to divide the human powers quite so drastically as that anymore. Both can be both. And this creates confusion, too, as you know. The homosexual is trying to be both masculine and feminine, and in a world that has long been specialist, masculine or feminine, creates great confusion. We haven't learned how to live with these things. But it's happening to us. You see, we are living mythically, but we still try to think rationally in the old 19th century pattern. But our lives are actually conducted at mythic speeds and multi-levels of things happening many levels at once, as in a myth. The word word, I think I've mentioned once, is mythos in Greek. Word is myth. In an information age, the whole culture becomes word. That's where the theologians need to heed the meaning of this time. Because sooner or later it's going to have some relation to the divine word. I think sooner. Since it is very much the wish of the divine word that this should be. This could be the greatest religious age in all human history, maybe the last.
That's why we just banned religion from the schools. Started working.
Well, does the Oriental mind see things already in a pattern? I mean, I'm trying to figure out some wedding.
Of us and they?
Of all.
And them? Well, I think that's happening at a very high speed. You don't have to figure it. It's just happening. And that's what one of the meanings of a happening means. A happening is an all at once, everything at once, total event. The world is becoming a happening.
So then the absurdity of the war becomes very obvious.
Yeah. It sure does. However, this is true of any war, not just this particular one.
Well, any war.
You know, the implications and the confusions are really deep. They're not just accidentally confusing. As far as the Oriental man is concerned, Mr. Takamura, this war is merely another phase of Western imperialism. Huh?
That's right.
They wouldn't allow that the West was fighting to retain its image of itself, trying to save face.
Now, President Johnson wants to save his face, and he doesn't know what to do. That's why he is just continuing the war. If he could find a way to save his face, he would. But now things are getting very clear in my mind that Asians are very feminine and goes rather to the inner trick. And it's always implosion. So while in the Western mind, now getting more feminine thanks to the electric age, but have been expansionist, have been masculine. So they consider war as a masculine war. Goes out of oneself to another, to aggression. That's aggression. But in Asia, it has always been inside the family. Between families, there will not be feuds. We have a word that the brothers fight inside the family. We have a word to fight inside the country, inside the town, and so forth. It has been a tradition in Asia that those feminine type A culture to fight always inside oneself, so it's always implosion. And this American government does not understand. They interpret any war as an aggressive from oneself to another war. If they, as you say, turn to this concept that this electric world is the implosion age, they might as well return to their own land and leave the agents to the agent's hand.
Yep.
With that theory, how do you justify the Japanese expansion during World War II?
That's what I expected. That's what you expected to answer, to ask me. Well, in my understanding now, we Japanese have considered the entire Asian area as one family unit. And we Japanese so-called it Greater Asian Hemisphere or something, and we did not feel that we were fighting outside of our own realm. We felt that we were just doing the implosion.
The Russians have a similar concept. The Greater Russians and Mother Russia. The core, which would be parallel to this theme, is Mother Russia. But then there's a periphery of other Russias all around Mother Russia. So they would tend to think of them all as one Russia.
Uh-huh.
In practice, they aren't one Russia. But that's what Mr. Takamura is saying, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I think so. So we Japanese never meant to attack, to go into the Western world, for instance, the United States of America. We merely meant to get the Westerners out of Asia. That's the purpose of the World War II. I think it's not clear in my mind. I would,
well, there's a recent book.
According to the McLuhan, I think this kind of interpretation is possible even for that seemingly expansionist World War II.
The recent book on Pearl Harbor that was published, given to me from the publisher, I suppose, is on the steps that led up to Pearl Harbor. Careful gunpowder trail laid by the State Department. Tremendous care, skill, so that there would be an open-shut case against Japan. It's now published, open for public inspection, that the Pearl Harbor was a put-up framing of the Jap. They were, in order to trigger the energies and motives in the West against Europe. Oh, not against Japan. Oh, Pearl Harbor was a powder trail laid to permit a war against Germany, Hitler. Without Pearl Harbor, couldn't have had a European war.
Well, wasn't this also, with the United States entry into World War II, an example of the U.S. trying to get away from even a tendency towards implosion? Like there was so much internal conflict, that they would rather resort to aggression.
Well, there is the quite miserable aspect of war that it serves economic needs in many ways. It brought us out of the Big Depression. The Second War was the big route out of the Big Depression. And at present, war serves a huge economic investment and prosperity, and control of productive levels in various parts of the economy. It's possible to program the whole economy as long as there's a war on, because the needs of the war are so great that they keep the whole economy simply humming. Now, that is the most sickening and desperate side of war, but it's true of all wars. They all serve affluence. On the part of a masculine, aggressive society, all war helps wealth and production and motivation. Everybody's got a motive, a drive on it. At the present time, you can see the great lack of this and the confusion resulting. Now, I think what we're saying here is that there's a desperate human need to understand these processes and a great need to avoid value judgments until we understand them. We don't have a clue as to who to blame for anything, really. The act of placing the blame is itself escapism. Value judgments in these matters are pure escapism. They serve that function of taking us off the hook, taking the heat off. So as long as people, you know how people like to pour scorn and indignation on comics and popular entertainment, this saves them any need to cultivate their minds or to do anything about cultivation in the arts. As long as they're rigorously opposed to all this other stuff, they don't have to do a thing. It's pure escapism. I've been amazed and puzzled by it for a long time, and I've been paying attention to it for a long time. When I wrote that book, The Mechanical Bride, I was amazed to discover how rich the world of this vulgar, trashy advertising was. The world we ignore, and in which, many of the best talents of our whole society, artistically speaking, are in the ad agencies. And there they are paid for exercising their talents, and the results of their efforts are expanded worldwide, much better than any art gallery can do. And yet we have classified all this as trash, as filth, and this saves us the need to pay any attention to what's going on. Same way when we place blame in war and aggression or in crime. The criminal in society gets it this way, too, without anybody trying to understand what goes on. So you can see what we're talking about here is communication. We're living in the first great age of communication. We've got to understand. We've got to share. Communicate means to share. We've got to share all these problems. It isn't a question of who's to blame or who ought to do this or that. It's a question of a deep need for understanding what's happening. And that is not a one-man job. It takes a lot of dialogue and a lot of observation, a lot of teamwork to understand anything. It's part of our team down there. Mr. Carpenter, great man. We're absolutely delighted to have you, Mr. Takamura, to expound any of these matters. You can see that, as far as a newspaper is concerned, that it would be fatal to take this approach to the problems of Vietnam or the problems of anything. Why? Why could no newspaper do this?
You lose your point of view, like everybody. You couldn't write objectively, and that's the whole basis of writing for a newspaper. You have to give both sides of the picture, be multifaceted.
Well, also, you see, there's no staff. There's no staff or writers available to tackle that kind of approach. The writers are all specialists, all fragmented. They have their beat here, and their theme on this side of the avenue. And what we're talking about is worldwide and in-depth.
Seems to be more subjective
than objective? All right. Involved equals subjective. Had you ever thought about the hula hoop? Please meditate on the hula hoop. It's the most involving thing that Western man has invented in many a year. That's what it used to be. Remember what the hoop was in 1910?
To roll it with a stick.
You beat it along the sidewalk with a stick, and only boys did this, not girls. It was not for girls. But today, I've seen parents and grandparents try to teach their children to roll a hoop. They refuse. Have you ever seen a kid rolling a hoop on the sidewalk? Beating it along right in a straight line? I haven't. But they like to get inside the thing and involve themselves in the ritual, which is a reeling and writhing and rhythmetical arithmetic. Reading and writing and arithmetic. But all at once. Through the looking glass. Well, I suppose our time is up, is it? Don't hesitate to bring real conundrums along, real toughies.
I'd like to apologize to the group that was in here for my being late. Forgive me.
Of course. And thank Mr. Takamura.
Did I miss much?
Yeah, you did. We're talking about communism in Asia. And it's... the natural tendency is to regard it, you see, as an intruder from the West. Its meaning in the West is totally different.
This has been so illuminating.
Very exciting.
I could write the McLuhan style.
They just put up their point of view.
Maybe an agent to supply the information when needed.
But you see, what if the Asians were to talk this way to us, we would regard that as another revolutionary intrusion.
Yeah, but Asians are not given much chance to explain that kind of thing.
But look at this. If they were to talk the way we're talking today, the West would regard it as a conspiracy, a subtle intrusion into our way of life. And, which is what we are getting from inside anyway.
Because you take it as an expansion.
It's Oriental. It would be kind of Oriental aggression
against the West. Orientals will never go beyond the own realm.
And what is the Asian view of Vietnam and so on?